Okay, so today's tutorial is going to be all about integrating quotations into your paper. So we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use for adding quotations into your essays and using the proper punctuation so that there's a nice smooth flow between your own writing and then the quotation that you want to add. We'll also look at the style conventions for MLA. So there are some general rules that you can follow to integrate a quotation into your own writing. The first rule or tip is to introduce your quotation by providing a little bit of context or explaining who the speaker and the situation is in which the quotation is being stated. So this is just a way to make sure that your quotation is, it's not self-explanatory to just stick a quotation in. You need to do the work of adding a little bit more information so that it makes sense. So the basic things that you could do would be to tell me who the speaker of the quotation is, and give me a little bit more background on what's happening in the scene, or a little bit more context for when the quotation is being spoken. Usually those two things are going to help add clarity to your writing. Second tip, explain to your reader why the quotation is important or relevant to your argument. Okay, so after you have a quotation, add one or two sentences just explaining why that quotation is relevant to your argument. You might want to pull out one or two words in the quotation and elaborate on them. It's not, like a quotation has to be explained or sort of deconstructed for it to be meaningful and effective in a paper. So you can't just throw a quotation in and just leave it at that. It's your job as the writer of this essay to elaborate and make sure those connections are clearly stated in your paper. And then the third tip, integrate the quotation to fit the grammar of your sentence. So we'll talk about specifically what that means, but you can think about a quotation as a kind of part of a sentence. It's not a complete sentence on its own, so it needs to be integrated or stuck into your sentence, and the flow of your sentence should not be interrupted by this quotation. So there are a couple different strategies, and we'll talk about in terms of fitting in a quotation so that it flows with your sentence and doesn't make for a choppy or awkward reading paragraph. Okay, so before we go on to some strategies of what to do, here's a look at what you shouldn't do. So the term dropped or dumped quotations is what you might see written on your paper, but this refers to a quotation that has not been adequately integrated, and it's just sort of sitting there in your paragraph, floating, and it's not connected to either sentence on either side of it. So it becomes almost like a sentence fragment or incomplete sentence that often sort of disrupts the flow of your writing. So in this example, we have a paragraph or a couple sentences here, and in red you'll see the quotations are added, but they're just standing sort of on their own as sentences, and they don't quite fit in, right? So they're just floating there, they're just dumped or dropped in the middle of your writing, and this is not effective a way to integrate a quotation. So just listen while I'm reading, and it should become evident that there are sort of other ways that this person could integrate or add more fluency to their writing. So in Tim O'Brien's story, The Things They Carried, First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross receives a good luck charm from a girl named Martha, period. It was a simple pebble, period. The pebble is symbolic of their relationship, period, where things came together but also separated, period. So we have a chance, an opportunity to make more connections and integrate some of these two quotations so it's more fluid and less abrupt when you add the quotation into your own writing. So in this revised paragraph, we have the quotation being integrated more fully. So if we read again, it should sound more fluid and the flow should sound better. So in Tim O'Brien's story, The Things They Carried, First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross receives a good luck charm from a girl named Martha. It was a simple pebble. The pebble is symbolic in that it represents the status of their relationship, where things come together but also separate. So in this revision, we did a couple of things. You'll notice the use of a colon after the first sentence. And this is one way that we can integrate or connect a quotation to a complete sentence. So a colon is used to show how that whatever comes after it is connected to the previous sentence. So as a quotation, it is not a complete sentence, so it can't stand on its own. So this is a nice way, an easy way of showing connecting these two sentences. And the colon suggests that the good luck charm is the pebble, so those two things are being connected. So a colon is your first strategy, and you would use it if you had a complete sentence that was leading up to a quotation and then you wanted to connect the quote. In this case, it was a simple pebble to your previous sentence. So use a colon for that case. And then our second sentence, the pebble is symbolic in that it represents the status of their relationship where things come together but also separate. So we added a few more words here in order to integrate or connect the flow and improve the flow of the writing. So there's sort of a seamless blend of the quotation into the structure of your sentence. And you'll also notice words have been changed. So the tense of the quotation has changed to the present tense. And this student has used square brackets in order to change the tense to fit the present writing, so the present tense in his writing. So you can improve your writing, your flow of your writing in that way too. So anytime you want to change the quotation, words, tense, or clarify something in it, add a name or something, you would do that in square brackets. And you'll also notice the end punctuation has changed. So the period has been taken out of the quotation and added after your citation. So the page number and then the period. So it makes sort of much more sense in terms of punctuation and the flow of the writing. Okay, so recapping, strategy number 1 is to introduce your quotation with a complete sentence. And a complete sentence will always have a subject and a predicate, or a subject, so who is doing the action of the sentence, and a predicate or verb that has a complete meaning to it. So you have a subject and a verb, and together those form a complete thought. So that's a sentence. And so if you have a complete sentence and then you want to add a quotation, use a colon to connect your sentence to the quotation. So in this example, we have Robert Ross in Timothy Finley's The Wars is often unsure of how to interpret his wounded companion's words. Colon. And then add your quotation. Harris said the strangest things lying on his pillow staring at the ceiling. Okay, so our connection between Timothy Finley's, the words, Robert Ross's thoughts, and what we're talking about are clearly connected, and we've got a colon there to make sure that connection is clear or evident. And our quotation is not a sentence on its own, so you can't put a period here because otherwise this this quotation would be dumped or dropped and just an incomplete thought. So we saw this already in our previous example. So in Tim O'Brien's story, The Things That Carried, First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross receives a good luck charm from a girl named Martha. It was a simple pebble. So here again, you have a complete sentence. You have a colon, and then you have your quotation. So tip number 2, if you want to integrate a quotation, you can also just have an introductory phrase. So a phrase includes, is just another way of saying, an opening part of your sentence where there's no subject and verb combination, so it's not a complete sentence, it's a part of a sentence. And in this case, you just have to separate your introductory phrase with a comma, or depending on the structure of your sentence, you don't need any punctuation at all. So depending on what you're saying in your phrase, you can just add your quotation in there. The rule here is never to use a semicolon to introduce a quotation. So colon is all right, semicolon is not the right piece of punctuation. So a semicolon will connect 2 complete sentences. That's when you would use a semicolon. A colon is used to connect 1 complete sentence to 1 dependent or fragment, an incomplete sentence. So in our example, we have according to Robert, so that's our phrase, and then we have a comma, and then our quote. So according to Robert, comma, Harris said the strangest things lying on his pillows staring at the ceiling. So you'll notice, according to Robert, we're telling the speaker of this quotation and indicating, giving a little bit of sort of setup for the quotation, so it makes more sense. Another very useful tip is to use signal phrases. And signal phrases are just sort of statements that announce whose idea that, or who is the speaker, and a little bit about that person. So there's lots of different sort of verbs that you can use to assert your signal phrase. But here are some examples of using a signal phrase to show that you've done some research on your topic and then you want to cite a secondary source. So your signal phrase is going to tell me, your reader, the speaker of the original quotation, and it might identify the name of the original essay, or give some background on who this person is. So you're going to use a signal phrase, especially when you're doing research, and it kind of tells me, whoever's reading your paper, that you've done your research and now you're sort of showing that. So you're showing you've done your research and you've read different critical essays, and now you're using other research to back up your opinion. So in this example, we have literary critic Elaine Showalter asserts that, quote, the heightened code of masculinity that dominated in wartime was intolerable to surprisingly large numbers of men. So I want to use Elaine Showalter in my paper, and I'm going to highlight the fact that I've read her essay and her opinion matters, that it's important to my argument. So in my signal phrase, I state her name fully, first and last name, and then I chose the verb asserts because she has the strong opinion and I want to highlight that fact. Signal phrases are also effective when you're doing paraphrase. So the second example is a paraphrase of a part of Sigmund Freud's essay, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. So in my signal phrase, I'm identifying the speaker, and then I'm going to paraphrase his thoughts. So in Beyond the Pleasure Principle, Sigmund Freud uses children's play to demonstrate the idea that one can use repetition as a means of mastering